Good morning, students. In today's class, let us learn regarding the hydrology and hydrologic cycle. As we all know, water exists on planet Earth in three forms, that is, the gaseous form, liquid form, and the solid forms, and it is circulated mainly by the solar and planetary forces. So here, the solar force or the sun provides the energy for the evaporation of seawater and Earth's gravitational field, and these forces will contribute to the circulation of water. So here the hydrologic cycle, it is being defined as the journey of water from the ocean to atmosphere and back to the earth. So from the ocean to atmosphere, it will be transported in the form of liquid to gaseous form in the form of vapor, as you can see in the image, and from the ocean again it will reach back to the earth and ultimately to the ocean through the process of evaporation, precipitation, percolation, runoff, and it will return to the ocean, and it is called as hydrologic cycle. So in this image you can see that the water starts evaporating from this as the energy of the sun reaches the water, and once it gets evaporated it gets condensed in the form of clouds in the atmosphere, and later after reaching the saturation, when the clouds cannot take up the more water vapors, it will release the waters in the form of precipitation or in the form of rainfall. So this water reaches the unsaturated zone and it will go as infiltration, and finally it reaches the water table and then again to the ocean. So here are some of the components of hydrologic cycle which needs to be understood. So one is precipitation. It includes the rains, snow, and other forms of water like drizzle, hails, sleet, mist, etc., which fall from the atmosphere into the land and oceans. The second component is evaporation, which is a physical process by which water is vaporized into the atmosphere from free water surface and land areas. The third one is the transpiration, where the water from the soil is absorbed by the plant roots and eventually it is discharged from the plant roots from the plant surfaces to the atmosphere through the little pores in the leaves called as stomata. Then the evapotranspiration, it is the combined process by which the water is transferred to the atmosphere from open water surfaces and vegetation. Then the next thing is infiltration, where the movement of water takes place from the land surface to the upper layers of the soil. In the next process, that is percolation, the water starts getting percolated deeply into the subsurface zones of the soil, and finally it reaches the water table. Then the overland flow, so the portion of the runoff that travels over the surface of the ground to reach a stream channel is called as overland flow. The last one is the surface runoff, which includes all the overland flow as well as the precipitation falling directly onto stream channels. So these are the some of the components of hydrologic cycle. Next, coming to the representation of the hydrologic cycle. So here the Horton's qualitative representation of the hydrologic cycle is given, where the arcs, numerous arcs which represent the different paths through which the water in nature circulates and is transformed, is called as the water cycle or the hydrologic cycle. So these arcs penetrate into the three parts of the total earth system, namely the atmosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere. The atmosphere is the gaseous envelope above the hydrosphere, and hydrosphere is the bodies of water that cover the surface of the earth, and lithosphere is the solid rock below the hydrosphere. So the activities of water extend through these three parts of the earth system from an average depth of about 1 kilometers in the lithosphere to a height of about 15 kilometer in the atmosphere. So here the hydrologic cycle can be represented in many different ways in pictorial or dramatic forms. It depends on the viewpoint it represents and is simply in general as it is difficult to represent all aspects of the cycle. So the qualitative representation of the hydrologic cycle wherein the various processes involved in the circulation of water are depicted in this particular Horton's qualitative representation of water, and in the engineering representation of hydrologic cycle where the evaporation is shown by wavy arrows that will be coming to know in the next topic. Though these figures are self-explanatory, qualitative description of the hydrologic cycle gives the detailed information regarding the hydrologic cycle. So the hydrologic cycle has no beginning or end as the water in the nature is continuously kept in cyclic motion. So however, for the purpose of description, the water cycle might be visualized or it can be seen that it is starting from the precipitation from the atmosphere, and precipitation will take place in the form of the rain, mist, snow, hailstone, dews, and frost. So, while precipitation is taking place, a part of it may evaporate and it may reach back to the atmosphere. So, some more precipitation is again intercepted by the trees and vegetation that we are calling it as the interception, and the rest of it will only possible to reach the ground. So the intercepted precipitation eventually it starts evaporating and it will again reach the atmosphere. So the precipitation reaching the ground surface is called as through fall. The whatever the effective rainfall that reaches the ground surface that we are calling it as the through fall. So, in the qualitative representation of the Horton's water cycle, here they have shown how the water reaches the Earth's surface in the form of precipitation. Then, some amount of water will reach the surface detention and interception storages here. Okay, it will start getting collected in the surface detentions and the interception storage, that is nothing but the water gets intercepted by the vegetation present. So the whatever the water that reaches the ground surface it starts infiltrating. Some of the water will start reaching the surface as surface runoff, and the rest water will again start evaporation from the surface detention and interception storage. The water that gets infiltrated it will reach the soil moisture storage, and also it will reach the groundwater. So it will reach the groundwater storage and it starts flowing to the groundwater flows as groundwater flow to the streams, and from the groundwater flow it may again reach the ocean. So you can see here the water that reaches the soil moisture storage it gets again evaporated in the form of evapotranspiration from the vegetation, and let and again it will start evaporating from the soil also, and it will reach finally the atmosphere. The water that gets run off it will reach the ocean ocean as ocean storage it will reach, and from the ocean storage again the evaporations takes place and again it will reach the atmosphere. So this is how the entire cycle is been uh, given, it is represented so in the form of circular arcs which include the different parts of the movement of water. Next, coming to the engineering representation of hydrologic cycle. So here as I told there is no beginning and end of the atmosphere or the no end of the atmospheric water cycle. So basically we are assuming that the water gets or it reaches the surface of the land in the form of precipitation, and there are different forms like hail, snow, dew, and frost. So while the precipitation is taking place, a part of it will evaporate and it will reach back the atmosphere, and some more precipitation is intercepted by the trees and vegetation, and the rest of it will only would reach the ground. So the intercepted precipitation, it starts evaporating and it will reach the atmosphere. The precipitation reaching the ground surface is called the through fall. So a considerable portion of the through-fall gets infiltrated into the ground, and that in excess infiltration would be detained temporarily on the ground, and it will later become the overland flow, and subsequently it may become the surface runoff. So the precipitation falling directly over the streams is called as the channel precipitation, and it is readily becomes the runoff without any delay. So the precipitation falling on the water bodies like the ponds, lakes may be disposed of either as surface runoff to streams if the water bodies overflow, or as the evaporation, or as infiltration. So the evaporation would also be taking place from the stream surfaces. So now the infiltrated water will be distributed in different ways. It supplies to the moisture. It is supplying moisture to the vegetation, and after utilizing it for the sustenance of their life, the vegetation again sends this moisture back to the atmosphere in the form of transpiration, where the plant leaves or the surface of the plant bodies start evaporating the water or the moisture in the form of transpiration. Secondly, the infiltrated water may percolate deep and it will become the groundwater supply to the surface streams known as the groundwater runoff, or it may become groundwater supply to oceans. So the water so the groundwater runoff is sometimes referred to as the base flow or the interflow. So the total stream flow, which is a sum of the surface runoff and the groundwater runoff, ultimately joins the oceans. And whereas from the oceans, it will again starts evaporating into the atmosphere, and thus it completes the hydrologic cycle. So the entire hydrologic cycle repeats when the atmospheric moisture precipitates on the ground after the cloud formation. Thus, the hydrologic cycle consists of various complicated processes such as the precipitation, interception, evaporation, transpiration, infiltration, percolation, storage, and runoff. So, these processes are the subjects of detailed discussion in the particular hydrologic chapters.